The alarm screamed through the command center of Krithis Prime, the heart of the Krithian Empire's surveillance network. Commander Vexrel jumped from his seat, his four eyes widening at the display before him. Something had just entered the outer rim of Imperial space, and it was moving faster than anything he had ever seen. His clawed fingers danced across the console, pulling up tracking data from the Sentinel arrays. The arrays were perfect, or so the Empire had always claimed. For 300 years they had monitored every ship, every asteroid, every piece of floating debris within 17 star systems. Nothing moved through Imperial space without their knowledge. Nothing escaped their notice. Until now. The object on his screen defied every rule Vexrol had learned in his 20 years of service. It appeared on the sensors at the edge of the outer rim, moving at 0.95 light speed. That alone was remarkable. Even the Empire's fastest military vessels needed weeks of constant acceleration to reach such speeds. This object had simply appeared already moving at that velocity. Vexrel ordered the tracking systems to lock onto the target. The computers hummed, processing millions of calculations per second. The lock failed. He tried again, failed again. The object was there on the sensors, clear as starlight, but the systems couldn't hold it. It was like trying to grab smoke with bare hands. He called for his superior officer. Within minutes, Admiral Kreshnor stood beside him, staring at the same impossible readings. Kreshnor was a veteran of 50 campaigns, a military genius who had conquered 4-star systems for the Empire. He had seen strange things in his long career, but this was different. The object changed course, not gradually as physics demanded, not with the long arcing turn that every ship had to make when traveling at such speeds. It simply changed direction, as if the laws of motion meant nothing to it. The tracking algorithms scrambled to predict its new trajectory. By the time they calculated the path, the object had changed course again. Kreshinor's jaw tightened. He ordered a full system diagnostic. Perhaps the sensors were malfunctioning. Perhaps some cosmic radiation was creating false readings. The diagnostics came back clean. Everything was working perfectly. The impossible object was real. The Admiral accessed the Imperial database, searching for anything that matched the object's signature. The database contained records of 10,000 different ship types from hundreds of worlds. It had data on ancient vessels, modern warships, civilian transports, and experimental prototypes. Nothing matched. The object's energy signature was unlike anything ever recorded. There was no radiation trail, no subspace distortion, no gravitational wake. It was as if the object wasn't using any known method of propulsion. More alarming reports flooded in from other sensor stations. The object had been spotted in 3 different locations within the same hour, separated by distances that should have taken days to cross. Either there were multiple objects or this single vessel was moving in ways that broke every known law of physics. Vexrel plotted the object's general heading. His blood went cold. It was moving deeper into Imperial space, heading toward the core worlds, toward the agricultural planets that fed billions, toward the manufacturing centers that built the Empire's fleets, toward Krithis Prime itself. He reported this to Kreshinor, who immediately elevated the alert status. Within the hour, every military installation in the sector was on high alert. Fleet commanders were awakened from sleep. Scientists were pulled from their laboratories. The Emperor himself was informed. The Imperial court erupted into chaos. Some ministers demanded immediate military action. Others counseled caution. How could they fight something they couldn't track? How could they defend against something that moved faster than their weapons could aim? The Emperor, ancient and cunning, asked the only question that mattered. Was this a weapon? Was it a scout? Or was it something else entirely? Nobody had answers. Kreshinor deployed hunter-killer squadrons to intercept the object. These were the Empire's finest ships, equipped with the most advanced weapons and sensors money could buy. They spread out across the predicted path, forming a net that nothing should be able to slip through. The object slipped through. It appeared behind the net, then in front of it, then beside it. The hunter-killers never got close. Their commanders reported the same thing Vexrel had experienced. They could see the object on sensors, but they couldn't lock onto it. It was there and not there at the same time. Hours turned into days. The mysterious object continued its impossible journey through Imperial space. It never responded to hails. It never showed aggression. It simply moved, appearing and disappearing, faster than anything should be able to move. The Empire's best scientists worked around the clock, analyzing every scrap of data. They proposed theories about quantum tunneling, dimensional shifting, and temporal manipulation. None of the theories fully explained what they were seeing. The object was breaking rules they didn't even know existed. Fear spread through the Empire like a disease. If this was a weapon, they had no defense. Their mighty fleets, their impregnable fortresses, their advanced technology, all of it was useless against something they couldn't catch or understand. And if this was just a scout, what would the invasion force look like? On the 5th day, the object was detected near Theta 9, a quiet agricultural world on the inner rim. This time it stayed in one place for nearly 3 hours, the longest it had remained stationary since entering Imperial space. Kreshinor ordered a full battle group to the system. 200 warships, the largest concentration of military power the Empire had assembled in peacetime. They surrounded the planet, sensors scanning every inch of space. Vexrel coordinated the search from the flagship, his eyes burning from lack of sleep. Every officer in the fleet knew this was their best chance to catch the mysterious intruder. The object appeared on their sensors, just outside Theta 9's orbit. This time it wasn't moving at impossible speeds. It was drifting slowly, almost lazily, as if it had finally decided to stop running. Kreshinor gave the order to close in slowly. No weapons armed, not yet. They would try to communicate first. The Empire had destroyed enough civilizations. Perhaps this time they could learn before they killed. The fleet moved into position, forming a perfect sphere around the object with a radius of 50,000 kilometers. Close enough to respond to any threat, far enough to have reaction time if the object tried its impossible maneuvers again. Then something changed. The object's energy signature began to fade. Not disappearing like before, but diminishing gradually like a star going dark. Power levels were dropping. The impossible vessel that had terrified the Empire for a week was dying. Vexrel stared at his screen in confusion. After all this, after all the fear and speculation, the object was simply running out of power. It sat there in space, silent and still, its mysterious journey apparently over. Kreshinor made a decision that would change everything. He would send a boarding party. They would finally see what was inside this impossible ship. They would finally meet whoever or whatever had the audacity to ignore the Krithian Empire's borders. The Admiral had one last thought as he gave the orders. What if the object's impossible behavior hadn't been a display of power at all? What if it had been desperation? What if they had been watching something die all along? He pushed the thought aside. Soon they would have answers. Soon the mystery would be solved. He had no idea how right and how wrong he was about to be. 3 weeks earlier, Captain Lisa Morgan had been excited about the future. The colony ship Wanderer was humanity's most ambitious project, carrying 3,000 people in cryosleep toward a new world called New Terra. The experimental quantum drive was supposed to cut their journey time in half, turning a year-long voyage into just 6 months. Now, sitting in her command chair with coffee that had gone cold hours ago, Lisa wondered if they would survive the week. The quantum drive had failed spectacularly. Chief Engineer Danny Price had shown her the damage, and even without technical knowledge, she could see it was bad. The drive's core had melted, fusing components together in ways that made repair impossible. Worse, the failure had damaged their main navigation systems and fried half their communication arrays. Danny sat at his station now, dark circles under his eyes. He had been awake for 36 hours straight, trying to keep the conventional engines running. Those engines were only meant as backups, capable of maybe 1/10 light speed at maximum burn. Without the quantum drive, they were crawling through space like a wounded animal. Navigation Officer Kevin Hart looked up from his console, frustration clear on his young face. He was fresh out of the academy, barely 25, and this was supposed to be his first big assignment. Instead of a routine colony run, he was trying to figure out where in the galaxy they had ended up. Every star chart came back unknown. Kevin had tried everything, comparing constellation patterns, measuring stellar distances, analyzing spectral signatures. Nothing matched any known human charts. The quantum drive's malfunction had thrown them across space in ways that shouldn't be possible. They weren't just off course. They were lost in uncharted territory. Communications Officer Amy Sullivan had even worse news. Her job was to maintain contact with Earth, relay messages to other human ships, and monitor standard frequencies for any traffic. For 3 weeks, her console had shown nothing but empty static. No Earth broadcasts. No colony chatter. No automated beacons. Either their communication systems were completely destroyed, or they were so far from human space that no signals could reach them. Lisa had made the hardest decision of her career 2 days ago. They couldn't reach New Terra. They couldn't contact Earth. They couldn't even figure out where they were. Their only hope was to find a habitable world, land, make repairs, and try to figure out how to get home. Kevin had found a yellow star system 17 light-years away. Long-range scans showed at least one planet in the habitable zone. It wasn't much, but it was something. A destination, a goal, hope. The Wanderer began its long burn toward the distant system. With their damaged engines, the journey would take 6 months. 6 months of hoping their supplies lasted. 6 months of praying the cryo chambers stayed stable. 6 months of wondering if they were flying toward salvation or just deeper into the unknown. Danny worked miracles keeping the ship together. Components that should have failed kept running because he refused to let them die. He rebuilt power couplings from spare parts. He rerouted coolant systems through maintenance tunnels. He trained the off-duty crew to perform basic repairs so he could focus on the critical systems. Lisa watched him work and felt grateful. Danny was good at his job, maybe the best engineer in the colonial fleet. If anyone could keep the Wanderer flying on improvisation and determination, it was him. Kevin spent his time mapping their surroundings. Even if they couldn't identify where they were, he could at least chart the local systems. He discovered they were in a densely populated region of space. Dozens of star systems within 50 light-years. Many showed signs of artificial structures, orbital facilities, and regular ship traffic. Someone lived out here, many someones probably. That should have been comforting. Civilization meant the possibility of help, but it also meant danger. Humanity had never encountered alien life before. First contact protocols were theoretical, designed by diplomats who had never expected to use them. Lisa had read those protocols. They all assumed humanity would be the discoverer, not the lost wanderer stumbling into someone else's territory. Amy tried to monitor the alien traffic, but the signals were encrypted or in formats her systems couldn't process. She caught glimpses of what might be communications, brief bursts of data that suggested organized society. But without understanding the language or protocols, it was just noise. The crew remained calm for the first month. Lisa kept them busy with tasks, drills, and maintenance schedules. She gave regular updates, always honest about their situation but emphasizing the progress they were making. Morale held. Then the cryo chambers started showing warning signs. The system failures from the quantum drive explosion were cascading. Temperature fluctuations, power irregularities. Nothing critical yet, but trending in the wrong direction. Danny estimated they had maybe 3 months before the chamber started failing completely. 3 months before 3,000 people began waking up to a ship that couldn't support them all. Lisa called a senior staff meeting. Herself, Danny, Kevin, Amy, and Dr. Claire Bennett from medical. 5 people to decide the fate of 3,000. The options were grim. They could maintain current course and hope to reach the distant system before the cryo chambers failed. They could try to wake some colonists early and put them to work on repairs, but that risked draining life support. They could attempt to broadcast distress signals and hope whoever lived in this region was friendly. Claire pointed out the medical reality. If the chambers failed while the colonists were still asleep, people would die. Hundreds, maybe thousands, before they could be revived. If they woke people early, the ship's life support could handle maybe 500 at a time. They would need to work in shifts, with most people staying in cryo as long as possible. Danny suggested a fourth option. They could push the engines harder, risk a burnout, but maybe cut their journey time. It was dangerous, but so was everything else. Lisa made the call. They would maintain course but prepare for early revival of essential personnel. Engineers, doctors, security officers, people who could help if things went wrong. And Amy would begin broadcasting simple mathematical sequences, the universal language that every first contact protocol recommended. That decision was made on a Tuesday. On Friday, everything changed. Kevin was running a routine sensor sweep when he noticed something on the long-range scanners. Ships. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. And they were moving to intercept the Wanderer's trajectory. Lisa rushed to the navigation station and stared at the display. The ships were large, clearly military in design, and they were forming a pattern around the Wanderer's projected path. Not attacking, not yet, but definitely not ignoring them either. Amy's console lit up with incoming signals. Multiple frequencies, multiple sources, all trying to communicate. The alien traffic they had been passively monitoring was now directed at them. Someone wanted to talk, or someone wanted them to stop. Danny checked the engines. They couldn't run. They couldn't fight. All they could do was maintain course and hope that whoever was out there had peaceful intentions. Lisa stood in the center of her command deck, looking at her crew. Young, scared, but trusting her to make the right choice. She thought about the 3,000 people sleeping below. Families who had trusted her to get them to a new home safely. She opened a channel to Amy. "Start broadcasting everything," she ordered. Every first contact protocol. Mathematical sequences. Pictographic messages. Old Earth music. Anything that might communicate peaceful intent. The alien ships grew closer on the sensors. The Wanderer sailed forward. A tiny, damaged vessel surrounded by an alien fleet. Lisa stood tall, projecting confidence she didn't feel. First contact was happening, ready or not. Admiral Kreshnor stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the mysterious vessel that floated in the center of his fleet. 100 warships surrounded it, weapons ready but not armed. The object that had terrified the Empire for a week now sat still and silent, 50 kilometers away. He had ordered scans of every type. Energy signatures, hull composition, thermal readings, gravitational distortions. The results baffled him. The vessel was made of basic metallic alloys, materials the Empire had stopped using centuries ago. Its power source appeared to be simple fusion reactors, primitive but functional. The engines were chemical thrusters, the kind found on early spaceflight vessels. This couldn't be right. This primitive ship had outmaneuvered his best hunter-killers. It had appeared and disappeared across Imperial space like a ghost. It had moved at speeds that should have torn such a basic hull apart. Commander Vexral brought him a detailed analysis. The vessel's hull showed signs of damage. Burn marks, structural stress, radiation scarring. Whatever had happened to the ship, it had been traumatic. The sensors detected atmosphere leaking from several sections. The fusion reactors were operating at barely 30% capacity. The ship was dying. Kreshnor ordered hails on every frequency the Empire knew. Radio waves, laser communications, subspace channels, gravitational pulses. Every method they had for talking to other species. The vessel didn't respond. Either it couldn't hear them, or it didn't understand. Science Officer Thelnis requested permission to approach. She was young for her position, brilliant but untested in real situations. She wanted to get closer, to take more detailed readings. Kreshnor approved but ordered a full escort. If this was a trap, he would be ready. Inside the Wanderer, Lisa watched the alien ships with growing anxiety. One of them was approaching, smaller than the others but still 3 times the size of her vessel. Amy's console showed it was broadcasting something, the same signal repeated over and over. She couldn't decode it, couldn't even identify the transmission method, but the pattern suggested communication attempts. Danny brought her the news she had been dreading. The cryo chambers were failing faster than predicted. They had maybe 72 hours before people started waking up. The ship couldn't support 3,000 conscious people. Life support was already strained maintaining atmosphere for the 5-person crew. If everyone woke up at once, they would suffocate within hours. Kevin noticed something about the alien ships. They were maintaining exact distances, a perfect sphere with the Wanderer at the center. The formation was too precise to be aggressive. If they wanted to attack, they would have done it already. This was observation, caution, maybe even fear. Lisa made a desperate decision. She ordered Danny to vent atmosphere from the damaged sections. It would create visible plumes that any spacefaring species would recognize as a distress signal. They were beyond pride now. They needed help and they needed it fast. She had Amy broadcast in simple binary. On-off patterns, yes-no signals, basic mathematical sequences, the most primitive form of communication possible. If the aliens were advanced enough for space travel, they would understand that someone was trying to talk. Aboard Thelnis's science vessel, the sensors detected the atmospheric venting. Her analysts studied the patterns and reached a conclusion. The mysterious ship was in serious trouble. The atmosphere loss wasn't from weapons damage. It was controlled venting, the kind done to show distress. Then her communications officer picked up the binary transmissions. Simple, almost childlike patterns. Prime numbers. Basic addition. The Fibonacci sequence. Someone was trying to establish first contact using the most fundamental language possible. Thelnis reported everything to Crescenor. Her assessment was radical. This vessel hadn't been playing games with the Imperial fleet. It hadn't been demonstrating superior technology. It had been malfunctioning. The impossible movements, the appearing and disappearing, the speed that defied tracking.
All of it had been a ship out of control. Crescenor considered this carefully.
If Thelnis was right, then the Empire had mobilized its entire military against a damaged civilian vessel. The implications were embarrassing, but also potentially significant. What kind of drive system could cause such malfunctions? What technology could accidentally make a ship move in ways the Empire couldn't match intentionally? He contacted the Imperial Court. The Emperor needed to hear this directly. The court was divided. Some ministers demanded immediate destruction of the vessel. Unknown technology was dangerous technology. Better to eliminate the threat than risk the Empire's security. Others argued for capture. If this ship's malfunction could teach the Empire new physics, the knowledge was worth any risk. The Emperor listened to both sides, then asked his own questions. Were there life signs aboard the vessel? Yes, Thelnis confirmed. Multiple beings, exact count unclear. Were they attempting communication? Yes, the binary signals were clearly intentional. Had they shown any aggression? No, none at all. The Emperor made a decision that surprised everyone. The Empire would offer assistance. Not conquest, not imprisonment, but actual help. For 300 years, the Crithian Empire had expanded through military force. Every species they encountered was either absorbed or destroyed. But this situation was different. These beings hadn't threatened anyone. They were victims of circumstance. More importantly, the Emperor saw an opportunity. The Empire's reputation across the galaxy was one of brutality. Conquered worlds feared them but didn't respect them. If the Empire could show mercy, demonstrate compassion, it might change how others viewed them. And if they gained access to new technology in the process, so much the better. Crescenor received his orders and felt conflicted. He was a military commander, trained to conquer, but he was also pragmatic. If the Emperor wanted diplomacy, he would attempt diplomacy. He ordered Thelnis to prepare a boarding party. No weapons, just scientists and engineers. They would make contact. The science vessel moved closer to the Wanderer. Cutting tools began working on the damaged airlock. Lisa watched through external cameras, her heart pounding. This was it. First contact with alien life. She wished it was happening under better circumstances, in a properly prepared situation with diplomats and protocols. Instead, it was happening on a dying ship with desperate people. The airlock opened. Crithian scientists entered, wearing protective suits and carrying scanning equipment. They found themselves in corridors designed for bipedal creatures, with artificial gravity and breathable atmosphere. Everything was smaller than Crithian standard, more cramped but functionally familiar. Then they found the bodies. 2 crew members who had died when a bulkhead collapsed during the quantum drive failure. The Crithians examined them carefully, recording every detail. These beings were fragile compared to Crithians. No natural armor, thin skin, no obvious defensive capabilities. Their technology was crude but showed signs of clever engineering and creative problem-solving. Thelnis made her way to the command deck where Lisa waited. They saw each other through a transparent quarantine barrier that Danny had hastily constructed. Neither side knew if they could safely breathe the other's atmosphere yet. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Human and Crithian, separated by millions of years of evolution, meeting for the first time. Lisa raised her hand, palm forward, in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. Thelnis studied the gesture, analyzed its implications, and slowly raised her own clawed hand in response. Communication was about to begin. The translation algorithm that Kevin cobbled together was crude but effective. It used the binary sequences Amy had been broadcasting, combined with pictographic symbols and mathematical concepts. Within 6 hours, humans and Crithians could exchange basic ideas. Within 12 hours, they were having actual conversations. Lisa explained their situation through the translator. Humans from a distant region of space, a colony mission gone wrong. 3,000 lives at risk. The quantum drive that had failed catastrophically. They were lost, damaged, and desperate. Thelnis listened carefully, recording everything. She asked about the quantum drive, and Danny tried to explain the principles. Even through the imperfect translation, she understood enough to be amazed. The humans had been attempting to manipulate space-time itself. Their approach was completely different from Imperial faster-than-light technology. Crude, yes, but conceptually brilliant. The drive had failed because they lacked the materials and precision the design required. It had torn holes in reality, making the ship skip through space like a stone across water. Every jump was uncontrolled, random, terrifying. What the Empire had seen as impossible maneuvers was actually a ship tumbling through space-time, its crew helpless inside. Kreshnor reviewed Thelnis's reports with growing interest. He contacted the Imperial Court again, this time with a proposal. The Empire should help these humans, save their colonists, repair their ship if possible. In exchange, they would gain access to quantum drive technology that could revolutionize Imperial science. The Emperor saw the value immediately, but others in the court were less enthusiastic. Commander Draxtil, leader of the military conservative faction, argued against helping the humans. Unknown species were potential threats. Their technology was dangerous. Better to seize the ship, study it, and eliminate any witnesses who might warn their homeworld about the Empire. The debate raged for hours. The Emperor finally settled it with a pronouncement. The Empire would offer humanitarian assistance. It was a propaganda opportunity too valuable to waste, the mighty Krithian Empire showing mercy to lost refugees. It would play well among the conquered worlds, might even reduce rebellion in the outer systems. Kreshnor received authorization to proceed. He assigned engineering teams to work with the humans. Thelnis would coordinate the scientific exchange. Medical personnel would help with the cryochamber crisis. Danny found himself working alongside Krithian engineers who were initially skeptical of human capabilities. They had better tools, better materials, more advanced knowledge. But as they worked together, the Krithians began to notice something remarkable about the humans. They improvised constantly, finding creative solutions to problems that Krithian training said were impossible. One Krithian engineer, a veteran named Korthal, worked with Danny on stabilizing the cryochambers. The Krithian approach was to replace all the damaged components with new ones, a complete system overhaul that would take weeks. Danny suggested rerouting power through secondary systems, bypassing damaged sections, and using manual overrides to maintain stable temperatures. It was inelegant, but it worked. Korthal was impressed. Imperial engineering was rigid, standardized, designed for reliability through redundancy. Human engineering was adaptive, flexible, designed for functionality through creativity. Neither approach was better, but they complemented each other perfectly. The cryochambers were stabilized within 48 hours. 3,000 colonists remained safely asleep, their lives no longer in immediate danger. Lisa felt relief for the first time in weeks. They weren't safe yet, but they weren't dying either. Amy worked with Krithian communication specialists to establish real-time translation protocols. The language barrier was shrinking rapidly. Within days, humans and Krithians were having complex conversations about science, culture, and philosophy. Kevin impressed the Krithian navigators by showing them his star charts. Even lost and confused, he had been mapping the local systems, cataloging stellar positions and calculating distances. The Krithians recognized familiar systems and were able to show Kevin exactly where human space was in relation to Imperial territory. The revelation shocked everyone. Humans and Krithians were neighbors. Their territories overlapped in several border regions. They had been living next to each other for decades, maybe centuries, without knowing the other existed. The galaxy was vast, and first contact was apparently just a matter of time. Dr. Claire Bennett worked with Krithian medical staff to understand alien biology. The differences were significant but not insurmountable. Humans needed different atmospheric compositions, different nutritional requirements, different medical treatments, but the basics were similar enough. Both species were carbon-based, breathed oxygen, and had comparable lifespans. While technical cooperation proceeded smoothly, political tensions were building. Draxtil's faction within the Imperial military was growing more vocal. They saw the humans as a strategic threat. If humanity had quantum drive technology, even in its primitive form, they could potentially match or exceed Imperial faster-than-light capabilities. That couldn't be allowed. Draxtil began planning. Officially, he supported the Emperor's humanitarian mission. Privately, he was organizing loyalists who believed the Empire's security came before politics. Once the human colonists were safe, once the technical data was secured, the Wanderer would need to disappear. No witnesses, no evidence, no warnings sent to human space. Kreshnor suspected something was wrong but couldn't prove it. Draxtil was careful, keeping his conspiracy small and secretive. The Admiral assigned trusted officers to watch the situation, but he couldn't act without evidence. Meanwhile, Thelnis made a discovery that changed everything. While studying the quantum drive's remains, she found data logs that had survived the malfunction. The drive had been recording its jumps, creating a map of sorts. Every time it tore through space-time, it left traces that could potentially be followed back to human space. She brought this to Lisa and Danny. The implications were enormous. They could find their way home. With Krithian help and resources, they could trace the path the quantum drive had taken and reverse it. It would take time and effort, but it was possible. Lisa faced an impossible decision. The Wanderer was beyond repair. Even with Krithian help, the ship would never fly again under its own power. The colonists needed a new home. The Empire had offered them Theta 9, the agricultural world where they had been detected. It was unclaimed, fertile, and suitable for human habitation. But accepting that offer meant staying in Imperial space, becoming part of the Empire in some capacity. Some colonists would never accept that. They would demand to return home, to warn Earth about the Krithian presence, to maintain their independence. Lisa called a meeting of the senior staff. They debated for hours. Danny argued for accepting the Imperial offer. 3,000 civilians couldn't survive without support. Kevin wanted to at least send a message home first, let Earth know they were alive. Amy suggested negotiating for autonomy, accepting help without accepting conquest. Claire worried about the medical implications of long-term human settlement in alien space. Thelnis attended the meeting as an observer and offered her own perspective. The Empire wasn't monolithic, she explained. There were factions, disagreements, competing philosophies. Some Krithians wanted expansion and domination. Others wanted cooperation and peaceful coexistence. The arrival of humans could tip the balance, but only if humans were partners rather than subjects. Lisa made her decision. She would present the colonists with options when they woke up. But first, she needed to negotiate terms with the Empire. Real terms, not just grateful acceptance of whatever was offered. Humanity's first diplomatic contact with alien life would set precedents for everything that followed. She requested a formal meeting with Admiral Kreshnor. The negotiations were about to begin. The colonists woke gradually over 3 days, small groups at a time, carefully monitored by human and Krithian medical staff working together. Each person emerged from cryosleep confused, disoriented, and then terrified when they learned the truth. Captain Lisa Morgan addressed them all in the cargo bay of an Imperial transport vessel, the only space large enough to hold 3,000 people. She stood on a platform looking out at frightened faces, families holding children, elderly couples who had risked everything for a new start, young people seeking adventure, all of them staring at her, demanding answers. She told them everything. The quantum drive failure, their journey through uncharted space, the Krithian Empire and first contact with alien life, the death of their ship and the impossible situation they now faced. She didn't sugarcoat anything. They deserved the truth. The reaction was mixed. Some people cried. Others shouted questions. A few demanded to speak with Earth authorities immediately. Lisa waited for the noise to settle, then presented their options. Option 1 was to accept the Empire's offer. Theta 9 was theirs if they wanted it, a whole world rich in resources suitable for human life. The Empire would provide initial support, tools, equipment, and technical assistance. In exchange, humans would share knowledge and participate in cultural exchange programs. They would be autonomous but not independent, part of Imperial space but not subjects of the Empire. Option 2 was to attempt the journey home. The quantum drive had left a trail that could potentially be followed. With Krithian help, they could try to reach human space, but it would take months, maybe years. The journey would be dangerous. Not everyone would survive, and they would be traveling through unknown territory in borrowed ships. Jake Peters stood up from the crowd. He was former Earth military, one of the few colonists with combat training. He spoke loudly, his voice carrying across the bay. This was a trap, he argued. The Empire was trying to control them. They should reject everything and find their own way home. Humanity didn't need alien help. Others disagreed. A woman named Helen Cruz, a teacher from New Seattle, pointed out the obvious. There were 3,000 civilians with no ships, no weapons, and no way home without help. Pride was a luxury they couldn't afford. If the Empire wanted to harm them, they could have done it already. The debate raged for hours. Lisa let it happen. Let people express their fear and anger and hope. Democracy was messy, but it was important. These people had trusted her to lead them to a new home. She wouldn't make this decision alone. Eventually, a consensus emerged. The majority wanted to accept the Empire's offer, at least temporarily. But they wanted guarantees: autonomy, self-governance, the right to maintain human culture and values, and most importantly, the ability to contact Earth and establish relations between humanity and the Empire. Lisa took these demands to Admiral Kreshnor. They met in a neutral conference room aboard his flagship with Thelnis translating. Lisa laid out humanity's terms clearly. They would accept Theta 9. They would share knowledge, but they would not be conquered. They would be partners or nothing. Kreshnor respected the directness. In his experience, conquered species begged for mercy or fought with hopeless desperation. The humans were doing neither. They were negotiating from a position of weakness as if they had strength. It was either foolish or brave, and he suspected it was brave. He contacted the Emperor with Lisa's terms. The response came quickly. Agreed with conditions. Humans would have autonomy on Theta 9, but would acknowledge imperial sovereignty over the system. They could maintain their own culture but must respect imperial law in shared spaces. And they would participate in a joint expedition back to human space to establish formal contact between the Empire and Earth. The Emperor had his own reasons for agreeing. The existence of another spacefaring civilization changed the galactic balance of power. Better to establish friendly relations now than risk war later, and if humanity proved to be a useful ally, it strengthened the Empire's position against rival powers. Lisa accepted the terms. They weren't perfect, but they were fair. More importantly, they gave humanity a future. She returned to the colonists with the news. Not everyone was happy. Jake Peters organized a group of about 200 people who refused to stay. They wanted to go home to warn Earth to maintain independence. Lisa didn't try to stop them. She arranged for them to join the expedition back to human space. Kreshnor would provide ships and supplies. Jake would command the human contingent. The remaining colonists, about 2,800 people, would settle Theta 9. Danny would lead the engineering efforts. Kevin would continue mapping the region. Amy would establish communications networks. Dr. Claire Bennett would set up medical facilities. The settlement was named Haven, a simple name that captured their feelings. They had found safety after being lost. They had found hope after desperation. Construction began immediately. Krithian ships delivered prefabricated structures, power generators, water purification systems, and agricultural equipment. Human colonists worked alongside Krithian volunteers, learning from each other. The differences between species created challenges but also opportunities. Human creativity combined with Krithian resources produced solutions neither could have achieved alone. Jake's expedition launched 3 months after the colonists woke. 10 ships, 5 Krithian and 5 modified human designs built in Haven's new shipyards. They carried the quantum drive data, Thelnis's research, and a message for Earth. Humanity was not alone. Allies waited among the stars. Lisa watched the ships depart from Haven's surface. She had chosen to stay to help build rather than return. Earth was her past. Haven was her future. She had been promoted to Ambassador Morgan, representing humanity in the Imperial Court. It wasn't what she had signed up for when she took command of the Wanderer, but it was what history required. Thelnis stayed on Haven as well, serving as the Empire's chief scientific liaison. She and Danny continued working together, now on projects that benefited both species. They were developing a stable quantum drive, combining human theory with Krithian engineering. It would take years, maybe decades, but they would succeed. Kreshnor returned to his military duties, but he kept watch over Haven. Draxtil's faction was still active, still plotting. The Admiral assigned loyal ships to guard the human colony just in case. He had grown to respect these strange aliens. They deserved protection. The Emperor announced the Haven Agreement to the entire Empire. For the first time in 300 years, the Empire had gained territory through cooperation instead of conquest. Reactions were mixed, but the propaganda value was undeniable. Some conquered worlds looked at Haven with hope. If humans could negotiate autonomy, perhaps they could too. A year after the Wanderer's quantum drive failed, Lisa stood in Haven's central plaza. Around her, human and Crithian children played together, learning each other's languages without the need for translators. Engineers from both species worked on new projects. Scientists shared discoveries. Merchants traded goods and ideas. She thought about the terrifying weeks after the drive failure. The fear, the desperation, the certainty that they would die alone in unknown space. Instead, they had found something better than their original destination. They had found a place where two species could build something together. The quantum drive's malfunction had seemed like humanity's end. Instead, it had been their beginning. One broken ship, traveling faster than the Empire could track, had changed the galaxy forever. Haven grew. Jake's expedition eventually reached Earth, 7 months after launch. The message they carried started a new chapter in human history. Earth's governments debated, argued, and finally agreed to send diplomatic missions to Imperial space. But that was someone else's story. Lisa's story was here on Haven, building a future where humans and Crithians stood together, where yesterday's fear became today's friendship, where the impossible became possible through cooperation. She looked up at the sky where 2 moons hung in daylight. One was Haven's natural satellite. The other was a Crithian orbital station, its lights visible even in sunshine, symbols of 2 civilizations, sharing the same sky. The Wanderer was gone, broken apart and recycled into Haven's infrastructure, but its legacy remained. It had carried 3,000 people to the stars, and though they hadn't reached their intended destination, they had found something better. They had found home,